Professor Robert Allen, traditionally the standard of living of European citizens is considered to be higher than the standard of living of Asian countries, including China. How this situation has changed until now?
That's a very big question, and it's been the subject of my research program for the last 25 years. In order to measure the standard of living, which is what I've been trying to do, we have to have information on incomes and on the prices of commodities that people buy. And so in the 1980s, I started collecting data on these things from price histories for cities in Europe. So I put together databases of prices and wages for European cities from the Middle Ages till the 20th century. And these data show, at least begin with Europe, they show in Europe that at the end of the Middle Ages, incomes for workers were quite high and similar in all parts of Europe. And from 1500 until 1800, there was a big divergence of incomes within Europe. And countries in northwestern Europe, like England and the Netherlands, they had constant real wages for workers, whereas every place else, Central Europe and Southern Europe, real wages fell. And by the time you got to the 19th century, workers in Southern and Central Europe were earning a wage that barely kept them at basic subsistence, whereas workers in Northwestern Europe earned several times that much. And as a result, they ate higher quality food, more meat, they drank beer and wine, and so forth. I think, in fact, this divergence within Europe happened before the Industrial Revolution. And in fact, it was the cause of the Industrial Revolution because businesses in Northern Europe found it profitable to use machinery to economize on expensive labor. And that's what drove invention in England, particularly. Now, so I haven't said anything about China to answer your question yet, or India. For that matter, but in recent years we've been able to add those parts of the world to this kind of comparison, starting in the 17th century. And what we find is that incomes there were quite low. So by the time you get to the 18th century, and we have a lot of information, the standard of living of workers in India and China was at the same basic subsistence level as workers in Italy or Spain or Austria or Poland. And that's since then economic development in the West, in Southern and Central Europe, has meant that wages have risen considerably above subsistence. They stayed very low in Asia until quite recently. Now they're beginning to go up there, but they're still a long way behind. So today a construction worker in Beijing who has experienced a six-fold increase in real wages, earns only as much as an English building worker did in 1880. So despite the economic progress that China has made, they're still very far behind in terms of living standards.